Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Uncanny Treks as we look at the first 8 ever issues of Avengers. That's the first 8 issues of Stan Lee on the Avengers, and as far as I know, the only 8 issues of Jack Kirby on Avengers, although I think maybe he did layouts for a couple later issues.
Yeah, Bob, I'm excited because it's the Avengers, which I had never read any of these before, Bob. Honest. You there?
I
Oh, yeah.
read a reprint of the first one, but it wasn't at all like I remembered.
Yeah, I had never read any of these. Honestly, I don't think I read an issue of the Avengers until, we started covering all this stuff on this podcast. So it's brand new to me. I have watched all the MCU films. Yeah, there's some variation there from those.
Yeah, well, I continue to maintain that until the Hickman run, you're not missing all that much.
Yeah, but you can see where a lot of the stuff from the MCU was inspired from, even some of the issues we're going to cover today.
For sure. So I'm Bob in Cascadia. That's Matt in the Southland. We are talking Avengers 1 through 8. We're jumping off, Matt, with Avengers issue number 1, Coming of the Avengers. And we're going to say great, okay, or dumpster fire as we go through. We have to say this one is great, Matt. Number 1, Coming of the Avengers. But I would say it's only great for historical reasons.
Definitely for historical reasons, Bob. I didn't particularly think the story was great. When I read issues this old, all I can think back to are the Birdman cartoons and the Hanna-Barbera type stuff. All the action from those cartoons is the same kind of thing we see here. In my mind, I'm picturing what weird thing is going to happen next.
Yeah, that's very true. One of the things that surprised me the most about this first one was I'd forgotten, and this will be a common theme throughout these issues of how many guest appearances there are, but I'd forgotten that Rick Jones only gets the Avengers together to save the Hulk after failing to get the Fantastic Four to respond to his cries for help.
Correct. And that does get the Fantastic Four on a panel, which means that this is a form of advertising back then. This is how they world built. They want you to go buy these other issues from these other comics. These characters are in other places. Go check them out. Was it a bad thing? Probably not, because they didn't have social media or anything at that point. There's nothing. The only other way they get it around was word of mouth.
Well, Matt, you've discovered the secret similarity between world building and advertising.
There you go, Bob. I've also discovered too, Bob, that I did not know what this Teen Brigade thing was with Rick Jones. It makes it all seem so innocent with the whole ham radio stuff, and the Teen Brigade is a proxy for, I'm assuming, who their audience is meant to be. The teenagers could see themselves in Rick Jones.
Honestly, I don't think the audience is teenagers. I think the audience is the sub-teens.
They're looking ahead.
Who could hang with the Avengers.
I could hang with these guys. They like ham radio. I see what you're saying. But go back to Rick Jones for a minute. He is the person that Bruce Banner rescues from the Gamma Blast.
I've read those original Hulk comics, but it was a long time ago, and I don't remember anything. Certainly, at first, he's Hulk's sidekick, as he pretty much still is here. And then I think he transitions to be the snapper car for the Avengers. And over the course of his life in Marvel Comics, he's been the sidekick to a lot of people. I think Captain Marvel, the one before Carol Danvers, and then I think several other characters, maybe Quasar. And so Rick Jones is a guy who I've been aware of him for a long time, but I don't really understand his deal in any specificity. And every time he shows up in a comic, I a little bit tune out or cringe or both.
It is rather strange, but the idea, though, I think, is that he's the only person who knows that Banner and the Hulk are one and the same.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And he feels responsible for the accident that did happen to Bruce Banner. It's not just some random teenager that hangs out with these people.
In that sense, he does have more reason to exist than, say, Snapper Carr over in DC and Justice League. But I dislike Rick Jones more than Snapper Carr, although both of those characters are eminently hateable.
And Bob, I want you to imagine for a moment, what if they had the Teen Brigade in today's society with the Avengers? How weird would that be?
I'm sure in some side book they still occasionally, maybe in the last 5 years, they've done something with the Teen Brigade.
They get all their TikTok people together. They utilize social media to reach out and figure out where the Hulk is.
Yeah, I forget what the kid gang was in the My Adventures with Superman cartoon, but I'm sure somebody's done something. It was the News Kid Legion. It is important to say, I don't think this is a good example of it, but Jack Kirby was in a street gang when he was a kid running the streets of New York City, and he uses kid gangs in a lot of his comics. The Newsboy Legion is a Jack Kirby thing. There's the Boy Commandos, which is a kid gang goes to World War II. And so this is not one of Kirby's better examples of it, but Kirby loves to use a kid gang in his comics.
When we say gang, we don't mean like ruffian type dudes.
I sort of do. I mean, It's maybe not full on the racist image you have when you say gang of, oh, the crack wars in the 80s in LA or something. But no, I mean, Kirby was in a gang of immigrant youths who ran around New York getting in fights.
Maybe then Kirby in the comics was trying to dissuade people from being in those types of gangs and being more hanging out with their friends and trying to help superheroes.
Scholars have argued, and I don't remember the specifics very well, but they've argued that the fights you see in Kirby comics are very inspired by his preteen and teen brawling experience in New York.
Oh, that's an interesting point. We'll bring up much later when we get to Captain America.
Oh, interesting,
Yeah.
interesting. Well, shoot, to keep going, Matt, to move from racism to sexism, who's more sexist, Reed Richards or Hank Pym?
Oh my, Bob, without a doubt, hate him. Jeez, that's not even a competition.
This is even before because we know where the Hank Pym Janet Van
Oh,
Dyne
yeah,
relationship winds up, and this is saying, you could see the seeds of it here, right?
I prepare myself to cringe every time Wasp is on the page because she's either going to be the victim of Hank's "I'm the man, I have to drag you along" attitude, or she'll be just fawning over anyone in the book, any dude. You name it. Even ones with masks. She's, oh, I bet he's handsome underneath that mask. I'm like, what the hell?
It is super sexist, but I do find Wasp being so thirsty for Thor at several points in the series quite amusing, I have to admit.
But it's not just Thor. She's thirsty for everyone.
This is true.
Everyone.
Janet is super thirsty all the time. This is totally true. Well, another important question, and the type of thing Janet Van Dyne might ask herself, how do you feel that Tony Stark is wearing socks underneath the Iron Man armor?
Okay, Bob, based on the panel you're referring to, it looks like his boots are made of tinfoil, the way they're just able to haphazardly fold on the floor, which I don't think that's suitable for Iron Man, his actual costume and combat he has to take part in. But I have to say, we have come a long way with how Iron Man gets ready, because here he literally, it's like he's putting on normal clothes.
I'm going to be contrarian and say I prefer this.
I'd rather him stand in the thing and all the metal stuff come around him. I like that.
You're just letting your childhood 90s cartoon nostalgia blind you, Matt.
I am Iron Man.
Gross. I do have to say, Matt, that I feel like I a bit share Loki's perspective in this first issue, that I'm only interested in the Hulk and Thor. All these other characters, dear God, I don't care.
That's the weird thing about Hulk here, because he's so much more human, but here he ends up in a circus to try to hide out as the Hulk, not as Bruce Banner, as the Hulk. And I had to come to grips that he has a different personality in these issues. They can function in regular society.
I know there have been multiple changes in the Hulk over the years and early in the Silver Age, but I don't know to what extent that they do a marked transformation and to what extent he's just not being written consistently from issue to issue of his own book or from month to month in the Avengers.
I was reading a little bit of a Hulk Grand Design to get an idea of what goes on with him at this point, and it's exactly how you just described it. It's inconsistent. So it just depends on the writer.
Those Grand Design books, usually they are following what's in the comics, but sometimes they are slightly altering for better continuity.
Definitely with the Fantastic Four.
That's true with like the X-Men one too, right? They try to make there to be some unified purpose to all the different aliens the X-Men had encountered over the Silver Age.
But we all know that's not true at all. It's just Monster of the Week type stuff. All right,
Yeah.
Bob, I do want to point out that on page 14, we do see Odin. Odin is not missing an eye. I will say maybe he has a glass eye, but it doesn't really show through. Then in page 19, Bob, Hulk winds up in Detroit, and they go straight into a tire factory, which I just thought was so spot on, because, Detroit automakers. And that's just a way for them to say, see, kids, your dad's cool working in that factory making tires. Be nice to your dad. He can meet the Hulk one day.
Well, it's good to propagandize on behalf of the parents, Matt.
Yeah.
So did you not know that Loki was the first Avengers villain?
Honest to God, Bob, I did not. I just figured they pulled Loki because he was related with Thor and it worked out. But now Loki was actually the first villain in the first Avengers comic book. Maybe that's why they went in that direction.
I thought I had an issue of Acts of Vengeance when we were kids that stressed Loki, the original Avengers villain. I guess I never lent that one to you, though.
No, or I just didn't read it.
Man, not reading my recommendations even when we were children.
Well, Bob, let's move on to issue 2.
The Spades Phantom, Matt. You wanted to begin at the beginning here.
Bob, let's look at this first panel. Has Thor calling out Hulk for only wearing his brown underpants to their meetings. They meet on a regular basis to discuss things. It's a 60s type thing. And like I said earlier, I started reading Hulk Grand Design, and that same panel is part of the Grand Design thing. It has a big part in the beginning about how the Avengers don't care for Hulk for many different reasons.
Before they disliked Black Knight, like we saw in our Black Knight coverage, they dislike Hulk.
They dislike Hulk because he walks around in his brown underpants and doesn't wear a shirt.
We were looking at these issues because you were so intrigued and enjoyed the Avengers' appearance in the Lee and Kirby FF so much. And when we were covering their early appearances in the FF, you expressed some concern about Hank Pym's constant pill popping. And here, early in issue number 2, we find out that, okay, Hank and Jan are constantly pill popping, but at least the pills taste bad.
At least they taste bad so they don't get addicted. That's what you can go for.
On page 11, there was a really dramatic panel that you had to text me.
Yeah, Bob, Iron Man plugs himself into the wall like a phone charger. It's so weird because as you plug your phone in tonight before you go to bed, just remember Iron Man had to do that back in the 60s. They called it.
There's a great paper to be written about the evolution of home technology in the Iron Man armor. I don't want to write it.
Bob, there's even more technology though too, because at one point in the comic, there's a tabletop color TV. I was, dang, the Avengers were calling out some crazy stuff back in the 60s.
But Matt, the technology goes in even crazier directions because on page 12, we find out that Iron Man had some serious hammer envy of Thor. And I'm only talking about a hammer, dear listeners. There are no other subtext to be read in.
Yeah. This was the most action figure thing that happens in these comics that I could pull out because he has this attachment he puts on his arm that is a hammer. And they make sure to show 2 panels of him going around and putting it on. It shows how his armor used to function versus what it is now, where magically he would have his hand shapeshift into a gun or a hammer or something. Whereas back then, he was literally taking pieces off and putting other pieces on.
You make the point, and I guess I'm forced to agree with you, that compared to what we see of Giant Man's cybernetic helmet on page 15, you gotta really prefer the Iron Man armor. It's much more aesthetically pleasing than Giant Man's cybernetics.
Oh, totally. And Ant-Man has this like helmet that's cybernetic, and I'm thinking, why does Tony Stark not also have this? And he's able to send out signals, but then you've got Iron Man in this bulky gold suit with his antenna sticking out of his shoulder. To me, I understand why they decided to switch looks going into the next couple issues.
Hey man, I think the answer is that Tony Stark works in iron, Hank Pym works in small things. That's the answer.
But maybe Hank Pym's meant to be the tech dude.
He shrinks down to do the cybernetics.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. He gets very small, whereas Tony Stark has to work with the big plates of armor.
I would, in general, not say that this issue is great, but I guess I'm going to have to say that it's great only because it's so historically important, specifically because we have the first person quit the Avengers in issue number 2, Matt. Hulk quits.
Hulk did not want to stick around, Bob. So I was okay with it, especially knowing what comes next. You're not going to be down an Avenger, but you're going to gain an Avenger at the same time.
This is a little bit of foreshadowing, Matt, but I didn't know that adding an Avenger would make such a difference to the book. But before we add that Avenger, Matt, we have issue number 3, Submariner. And man, this one is disappointing, even though it begins with Ben Grimm thinking that Iron Man wants a date and making fun of him for it.
Very disappointing, because I thought maybe Submariner would be the next Avenger, Bob. Didn't work out. Maybe we'd see a turn for the better. I do want to point out too, Bob, that Iron Man does go with his classic red and gold costume here, which was designed by Steve Ditko.
Ditko did some early Iron Man. I think Kirby did the first one, or maybe Don Heck, but I didn't realize that the red and gold costume was a Ditko creation. That's cool.
Right, and in the previous issue, he had that bulky one that was painted gold.
Yeah, it was either created by Kirby or Don.
The technology with Iron Man takes a huge bump here in this issue, because they're literally predicting video holograms that can be sent all over the world in 1963. That's insane.
So you mean have Tony Stark to blame for Skype? That's what you're telling me?
Yes, you do, Bob. All that stuff we had to do in 2020, we were watching each other talk. Yes, that's Tony Stark's fault.
Man, so we've got an array of guest stars in this one. At first, we've got Ben Grimm refusing to get cruised by Iron Man. Then we have Spidey getting angry at Iron Man, and then we have Angel telling Iron Man that he'll help him, but then Professor X getting angry at Angel promising to help Iron Man. So we really get a full spectrum of the current Marvel publication line, right? But all this is rather disappointing because we are promised Namor on the cover, Matt, but we don't actually get Namor till page 15 of issue number 3.
Bob, on the splash page, on the first page of the issue, it told you he's not coming till 15. You knew it was going to happen. So if you were sitting at the comic stand and you were flipping through and you saw that, you know, okay, when I buy this book, I'm not going to get Submariner till page 15 when I only have 10 pages left in the comic.
Matt, I have to confess, I often don't read all the captions.
Yeah. But I mean, it kills me though because it was so obvious they had to advertise all the other properties first before they could get to the main story. Which, once again, it's world building. It's what they're trying to do.
Well,
And
and it's just a marked contrast in quality with given how like creative and how high energy Namor's appearances in the early Fantastic Four are. Namor's appearance here in Avengers is much less quality.
it is rather weak. Although there are some good scenes between Namor and Hulk, and the actual fighting is pretty well drawn throughout. It's more the wrestling, which you had mentioned earlier about how you think that Kirby's drawing style and the way he choreographs the fights are more like street gangs when they're fighting, and that is exactly what happens here. You don't see these kind of things drawn like this anymore in comic books. The fights aren't this close combat and everybody's all discombobulated on top of each other.
Agree with you about the quality of the action in this issue, and my favorite panel even does actually come from this issue from the whole collection. But I don't know, there's something a little disappointing about like the Hulk and Namor alliance seems so perfunctory and underdone, especially compared to like how fun Namor's interactions with like Doctor Doom, and I also want to say the Mole Man in Fantastic Four were in a lot of ways, even though I think you're right about the quality of Kirby drawing the action.
I'm not justifying the relationship between Submariner and Hulk because it's not as fleshed out as it could be, and there's not much really there to draw on, period. But the actual fight scenes themselves, I was happy with.
That's fair. Well, Matt, I'm gonna propose we leave number 3 just in the arcade tier because
I'm perfectly fine with that. I agree. Because the next issue, really good issue.
Yeah, and who knew this was going to be such a turning point? So issue number 4, Captain America Lives Again. Matt, we begin rather problematically because Captain America famously is frozen after World War II, and a bunch of Inuits are worshiping him. And then Namor starts fighting the Inuits, but then he starts declaiming to himself about how he should be ashamed of fighting them because Namor's pretty racist against Inuits. All that was rather dire. But we get to better days when on page 5, Captain America is woken up and his first word to the Avengers are, "You can't kill Bucky, I'll smash you all."
Well, Bob, it didn't happen like that in the film. None of it did. Where was all this racism in the films?
Racism in the film, but also I don't recall Cap fighting the Avengers at the beginning of that movie or at the end of his solo movie. And seeing him just absolutely wash all of the Avengers on page 7 was really something, right? And
It's pretty awesome.
especially since your Cap is, for the most part, is much less powered than all of these people. But him just going through them really does seem influential on how, say, Grant Morrison will write Batman and JLA in the 90s.
Then you move on to, of course, Steve Rogers experiencing the cool things of the time, which is 1963, so he's amazed by TV and tall buildings. Whereas in the films, it's completely different.
It's more the fact that it's the United Nations and less the fact that it's tall.
Oh, okay, Bob. So because they're united now, not fighting. I see. A pleb like me just didn't get that.
Hey, man, the dream of the post-war
Yeah.
order has been realized. Cap was frozen, so he didn't.
I will say, Bob, one thing I do love about this issue, too, is that on page 12, they're trying to seek out this guy that's somehow in cahoots with... I'm sorry, Bob, I've completely forgotten the list here. What is the guy here for? The Broccoli Man.
I don't remember the specifics, but I'll just say, in general, this book, speaking of crazy left turns, right? Crazy
Right.
tonal shifts, which we've mentioned, this book just totally becomes a Captain America solo book.
And that may be why it's so good.
Yeah. All the Avengers have been turned to stone, and so Captain America is fighting a bunch of mobsters, and then it turns out that the boss of the mobsters is a celery man.
Right, and they had sent out this wild goose chase with the Teen Brigade, who were out profiling guys, white guys with glasses and dark hair, which I just found hilarious. Because everyone they find is, oh, he took his hat off and he's bald. Can't be that guy. His hair's not dark enough. But they do manage to find the dude in all of New York. Yeah, I love that. And I do want to point out, Bob, you did say the Celery Man. Are these the same dudes, the same broccoli people that, Phoenix destroys their homeworld?
I believe so, but I can't absolutely be sure.
Wow. I mean, he was kind of an asshole, I will say that.
Yeah, maybe the celery people had it coming. Celery people had it.
This one representative of the Celery people, Phoenix
Yeah.
destroys your planet.
Yeah, in general, it's amazing. I knew Captain America joined the Avengers in issue 4, but I didn't appreciate what a huge shift that would be for the book, if that makes sense.
Right, but I'll tell you what, that shift does not happen in the next issue, Bob.
See, disagree. Originally, I was going to put number 5, Invasion of the Lava Men, in the bad or the okay, but I got won over specifically by page 9, where Kirby just draws the hell out of this Lava Men splash page. There's such an energy that Kirby brings to the Lava Men of all things that I don't know, man. I had to say I like this issue quite a lot.
The art outweighs the story, yes, I give you that. And there's one specific scene in this book that I will say I did enjoy. And I would put this in the okay category. There's a scene on page 17 where Giant Man, he takes a helicopter, turns it sideways with the propeller still spinning, and uses it to blow back the lava men, when in reality, he went straight up on those lava men and sliced them to death.
Yeah, that's macabre. I don't really have a good sense of like the lava men's skin. Maybe it's very hard. Maybe a helicopter blade would not necessarily pierce it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I would also assume that too. They're also heavy because they're made of like rock and stuff, so that'd be harder to blow them back. The logistics are there though, and I feel like if they wrote it today, Giant Man would totally go at these guys with the blades, and it would be a Wolverine type scene.
Oh man, that's depressing. Giant Man is the Wolverine of the Avengers. Well, Matt, on to issue number 6, another super historically important issue because we meet the Masters of Evil.
Bob, I was excited. The first thing you see, though, is that you find out that Cap has upgraded his shield with magnets. So now when he throws it, it comes back to him without having to do the whole boomerang type thing he was doing before. I was excited to see that was an actual thing. Some people don't know that it's all magnets.
It's all magnets. Although I want to say that might be ditched at some point in the future. I'm not sure about that, but it might be ditched at some point.
Not in my canon, Bob. Not in my canon.
Okay, Matt. Not in your canon. Well, while you're attracted to the magnets, Matt, I really dig the sloth that's just hanging out in the Amazon jungle outside of Baron Zemo's headquarters.
It's just chilling out there.
Look at its eyes. It's got really crazy eyes, that sloth.
Yeah, well, so that drew your attention, but not Zemo walking on top of indigenous people?
I did notice that. That is pretty messed up, Matt. That is pretty messed up.
Folks, this is literally the same page.
We do see Baron Zemo being your archetypal Nazi tyrant. Then we establish our Masters of Evil team, and we have a villain for each hero. I believe Zemo is a new character, but it's retconning him as an old Captain America villain. And then we have Black Knight being brought in, and this is not Dane Whitman, who we read about in the Black Knight miniseries. This is his evil uncle. And Black Knight is brought in as a Giant Man villain. We have the Melter, who is an Iron Man villain, and then we have Radioactive Man, a Thor villain.
What's really cool about that Black Knight reference, though, is that in the comic we did cover, they alluded to all the different previous Black Knights, and he was one who you could tell was the Nazi one.
I don't know if he would be the Nazi one. He might be, but I'm not sure because of the sliding timeline.
I like to think he is.
He might be. That he's hanging out with Baron Zemo is a pretty Nazi thing.
Right. So that's how I put it together. But based on that one image from that series.
Another connection to the Black Knight comic is, and this is also just a funny little staging issue, is we don't actually see this happen, but off panel, Thor KOs the Black Knight and jacks his winged horse.
Right.
And so it's pretty funny to see that happen after the big deal being made about Elsa Bloodstone wanting the Black Knight's horse.
Right. She'll just flat up take it, but Thor will not. Thor refuses to steal it, even though he's, sitting on top of it. He will not take it.
He won't take it for good.
Right. He knows it's legally still the Black Knight's, and he needs it back.
Well, in fairness, Thor also doesn't really need it, right? He flies with Mjolnir, or he hurls Mjolnir, and therefore flies.
He can spin Mjolnir around and act like a helicopter type thing.
And we're also not really in the animal rights perspective, because that also seemed to be part of the issue, is that it seems like the other Black Knight, Dane Whitman, is pretty irresponsible with how he treats his cloned animals. Right?
Yeah.
And so I think that was subtext in the Black Knight miniseries, is that Bloodstone doesn't approve of how he treats his winged horse or his goat butler.
One thing I do want to say about the Black Knight, Bob, he did have a really cool lance that turned into a gun, which I thought was awesome. But it does even better because when that doesn't work against Thor, dude pulls out a Magnum revolver and aims it right at. It's awesome. That's one of my favorite images from this comic. Like, oh, well, that didn't work. Let me pull out my revolver, shoot you in the face.
Funny. Well, moving on to issue number 7. This is another Zemo issue. He doesn't really reform the Masters of Evil, but he does team up with the Exquisite Enchantress and the Evil Executioner, Matt. But we begin on page 2 with Iron Man getting a 1-week suspension from the Avengers. And what especially amuses me about this page is that rarely in the Thor solo comic do I see him acting like this, but here Thor is sitting in judgment on Iron Man, and he's acting a lot like his father, Odin. And so I think that's funny. I don't feel like you see that very often in Thor solo.
That is cool. And the previous page, Bob, you've got Giant Man confronting Thor as his big self. And it looks like a father trying to get onto a kid, the way he's positioned.
Yeah.
But they only gave him a 1 week suspension, Bob, because they know they need Iron Man. You can't do this without Iron Man.
I think you actually could, Iron Man. If we keep reading these comics, we'll find out very quickly that the Avengers do, in fact, do it without Iron Man.
They need his money for some stuff. Trust me. They can't just live off heroics.
Yeah. Matt, another interesting thing that comes up this issue, besides the politics of Avengers member discipline, is we get a lot of homoerotic subtext with Captain America. So,
Oh, a ton, Bob. At one point, Cap just needs a workout, so he goes to a gym on the other side of town and fights 5 dudes.
well, you wouldn't want to do it on your home side of town, right? Where somebody might tell Tony Stark or Hank.
You're way over there on the other side of town fighting 5 dudes in a gym.
There was already a lot of subtext with Rick Jones. I was already texting my boys about it. Then on page 6, Matt, we get just a whole nother level of Rick Jones getting a Bucky costume out of Cap's closet, causing Cap to go into a crying rage.
Who is so comfortable with Captain America that you could just find this costume and put it on and be like, hey, I thought you'd like it? That's not subtext. I don't know what is.
Hey, man, Rick Jones can be very intimate with the Hulk, and he thinks he can be similarly intimate with Cap.
Yeah,
That's all it is.
apparently.
Man, Rick Jones's position in these comics where he's telling Cap that, oh, just because you see a guy who was a Nazi walking around New York doesn't mean you can punch him. Come on, Rick. Cap can punch any ex-Nazi he likes.
He's Captain America. He can do what he
I
wants.
mean, in a real way, though, Rick Jones is having to be the voice of American foreign policy of, come on, Captain America, I know you fought Nazis in the war, but now there are allies against the Soviets.
That's insane.
Yeah, somebody should do a Project Paperclip comic where Baron Zemo and the Red Skull are brought to America in order to fight the Soviet Union. But that would be a good.
That sounds like something that has already been done at some point. It has to have been.
Somebody should have done it, but I don't think anybody has. The risk would be, depending on the writer, you could get a version that was very critical of the Cold War, or you could get a version of, oh, well, we had to do something to defeat those demonic communists.
Well, Bob,
Speaking of demons, Matt, we do see some cool demonic dream spells from the Enchantress, so I enjoyed that.
oh, yes. The way that Iron Man and Wasp, it's nightmare fuel with those two. It's creepy the way he draws them.
I'm always creeped out when I see the
Yeah.
Iron Man and Wasp, Matt.
And then, Bob, on page 15, I just wanted to highlight that Giant Man is falling all over buildings and just destroying them. There is no way he didn't kill people there.
So are you more concerned about the civilians in this comic or the lava people in issue 5, Matt?
Well, Bob, obviously the civilians in this comic, lava people aren't real people.
Oh, wow. Being very problematic. Well, Matt,
My question, too, is, Bob, the lava people never ran into the mole people down there? That's my other thing. Why are they not having a civil
They
war?
must have at some point. I think the lava people are a recurring motif. I didn't mention this in the issue, but there's a footnote about how Thor has fought the lava people before.
And that's my thing. You figure with their world building here, they would have put those two together. And when I was reading the lava people issue, I kept waiting for Mole Man to show up, and he didn't. Maybe they're deeper underground.
Well, Matt, I've got to say, I am a noted hater of Tony Stark and Iron Man, but he does a thing in this issue, which is maybe the coolest thing that anybody does in all 8 issues. And he's at home on suspension. He's got his heart armor plugged into the wall. He's charging it like a cell phone. But he also needs to recharge his soul, Matt. So he's smoking, despite the fact that he has this serious heart condition. And that's great, Matt. I really respect that.
Smoking back then was good for you, Bob.
It was good. It clears out all the congestants to your heart.
It just cleans you out. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with smoking in the 60s.
Nothing wrong with it at all. Look at Mod Enchantress and Turtleneck Executioner on page 17 and tell me this is not great.
Yeah, they've definitely got that 60s swinger vibe going.
They really do. They're like, hey, my wife and I saw you from across the juice bar and we really like your vibe.
All right, Bob. Issue number 8, Kang the Conqueror.
Yeah, Matt. So thought to your conversations about Rama Tut in the Fantastic Four issue we looked at recently, I thought maybe there was going to be a little bit more playing out of when are we going to realize that Kang and Rama Tut are the same guy at different points in his timeline. But nah, man, we went straight to it. We know now that Kang is Ramatut, although I still don't quite understand what came first, Ramatut or Kang, but that's just me not reading closely enough, I'm sure.
Well, one of the ways that they managed to take down Kang Bob is with what I've referred to as a gas EMP, which I thought was way beyond their time at this point. Giant Man shoots him with this like grenade thing. Well, I guess it is an EMP grenade in a sense, but it lets off a gas that just destroys all the circuits and technology on his costume.
See, you were impressed by the weapons technology, Matt, because you got Tony Stark mindset or Hank Pym mindset. I am impressed by Kang's invisible anti-grav chair that he's just reclining on page 5. It's pimp stuff, Matt. It's pimp stuff. And honestly, you could have a great lounge off between Kang and Doctor Doom, Doom and Kirby's FF, and Kang here. They both they lounge around like kings. I love it. You could throw Baron Zemo walking on the indigenous people into that equation too, but that's not cool. That's just racist. Nonetheless, Kang is better at lounging than Doom, Matt, because I think Doom is always sitting on a visible chair, and it's much cooler to have an invisible one.
An invisible throne is pretty awesome, Bob. And going back to what you said about technology, yes, Bob, I really appreciate how they've incorporated technology into these earlier comics, because sometimes when you go back to these things, you think you're going to read it, and it's going to be, okay, this is going to be stupid, because if I read comics from my time, the technology was already there, the computers and all that stuff, but they're pulling out some really cool stuff. One thing I didn't get to mention earlier was that they had the Fulton surface-to-air recovery system being used by Iron Man to contain Radioactive Man, which was really smart. They even use that same system in The Dark Knight when he extracts the dude from Hong Kong.
See, Matt, more Tony Stark kind of mindset. You should be an arms dealer.
Apparently, I'm really into these old-school weapons.
So, Matt, I was going to ask, which issue do you think had the coolest weapons tech?
Well, no, Bob, I have to go with issue number 4, the Captain America issue. And like you said before, it changes the way, it shifts the tone a little bit. That's why Captain America has withstood the test of time. Because he really, if you think about it, if you look at any other Avengers series, they usually always start with Captain America being found. He's the soul of the organization.
Yeah, it really gives the book identity and purpose that it doesn't have in the first 3 issues. Like, there's an interesting version of the story about the Avengers coming together to hunt Hulk.
Right.
Coming together as an anti-Hulk squad. Because before Cap, Hulk is the centerpiece, but at least as executed by Lee and Kirby, that doesn't really come off here. Who knows what the book would have been if Cap hadn't been resurrected, but it is the resurrection of Cap that gives the book an identity. You're right that number 4 is probably the best issue in that sense. I'm just going to give it to number 8 just because I really dug the Kang issue and I wanted to have a different answer, but yeah, you're right.
The Kang issue was great. I know we didn't spend as much time on it, but it is well worth a read, especially if you're reading along with the Fantastic Four stuff we're covering in the Epic Collection. It's neat to see how this all plays out with Kang the Conqueror and then what we eventually find out way down the road with these characters.
And get a sense of what we might have had in the MCU if things had played out differently. Matt, what was your least favorite of these issues?
My least favorite, Bob, was issue number 5, and it's just the Lava Man thing. It just was not as interesting. The art's amazing.
I agree with you. If you're just thinking abstractly, that's the least historically important of the issues. But I really like the art. So I would have to say either number 2 or number 3. And I guess since number 2 is important for the Hulk quitting, you go with number 3, even though, Submariner meeting the Hulk and Submariner meeting the Avengers to be really important. But just the handling of that is so subpar that, I'm going to go with 3.
Issue 3 had a whole lot more potential.
Whereas 5 didn't have any potential at all, but Kirby really used it to its max.
I really think, Bob, that both of us agree, though, that my favorite Avenger is Captain America. Are you in the same boat?
Oh, yeah.
For these 8 issues, yes.
The only other plausible choice would be Hulk.
Which I find fascinating, because when you think of Hulk, you don't think of the character development, but there's so much more of him doing things in these early books than what you see in the future.
Iron Man, Giant Man, Wasp, and Thor are pretty much non-entities.
Now, Bob, my least favorite character is the Wasp. Not because she's a woman, but because of the way she's written.
Which she's written that way because she's a woman, so indirectly.
Correct. She's written that way because she's written by a man.
It's
in the 1960s, and it's just so poorly done to read it nowadays. It's just bad, and I can't get it. Every time she comes on the page, especially if she's on the same page with Hank Pym, there's going to be something cringy that's said. And of course, every single time, I'm not disappointed.
I can't disagree with you because everything you're saying is correct. I do actually find Jan a pretty charming character generally. Seeing her, I'm always, even though Sue Storm is handled very badly too, But like with Sue Storm, as soon as you see her in a 60s Avengers comic or 60s FF comic, you know something cringy is coming. But I'm still fond of Jan. I like when she shows up. And despite the sexism, I do feel like she is still charming and funny. Her thirst is ridiculous and sexist, but it is somewhat charming. And so I can't go with her for my least favorite. I would say Rick Jones and the Teen Brigade, if they count as Avengers. If they don't count, I guess I would say Giant Man. Even though Giant Man does more in fighting, Wasp is a lot more memorable of a character than Giant Man in these issues, even though she does less and is obviously much more sexistly portrayed. Does that make sense?
That does make sense, because Giant Man's involved in a lot of the fight scenes, because I mean, he's a huge guy. Wasp is the part of the smaller character, whereas I think previously they were both meant to be Ant-Man, Wasp, but they realized it's kind of redundant to have two superheroes that can shrink. So let's make one get bigger.
Yeah, I don't know what the backstory about that was. Had they already independently decided to level him up to Giant Man for a solo book, or was it, oh, if he's hanging out with Thor and Iron Man, we need to make him more physically imposing?
Well, Bob, when we talk about villains, my favorite villain is Zemo, because honestly, I didn't know that his mask was stuck to his face, which I think is hilarious. And I've been reading about Paste Pot Pete in the Fantastic Four. I really need Zemo to meet up with Paste Pot Pete so they can get that figured out. And the dude's just a straight up Nazi. I mean, he's a bad guy. He's a super villain when you think of stereotypical.
He walks on indigenous people. He's not great.
Yeah, when you think of stereotypical supervillains, this is the man they're talking about.
Do you know who Paste Pot Pete is rebranded into?
Trapster, which is a better name and gimmick, even though he's still using the paste. It's more interesting.
We'll see some of Paste Pot Pete as the Trapster in the next FF volume we cover.
That's what I'm currently working my way through. So
Nice.
he's got a pretty prominent role there, and every time he shows up, I smile.
Yeah. My favorite villain in these issues is Kang, but Zemo, very respectable choice. Matt, who's your least favorite villain in these issues?
It's Namor, Bob. I'm sorry. There's so much more they could have done with Namor.
Yeah, you just expect so much more from the first encounter of the Avengers and Namor. It's disappointing. Well, Matt, what was your favorite panel? And it will tie into your love of Paste Pot Pete.
It will, Bob, because in issue number 6, Captain and Giant Man, they're actually glued to the ground, and they break up the ground beneath the paste, and then they're pulled in a tow truck by Tony Stark in his Iron Man gear, but they're being pulled towards the Black Knight. They're going to joust with him. I just thought the whole thing was just beautifully illustrated. The truck is such a 1960s truck. Having Iron Man in the driver's seat just looks funny to me. But it's so wacky, but it's so on point and on par with what these comics are about. That's why I like that scene.
I like that we both went with wacky choices for our favorite panel. Mine is in the fight scene in issue number 3, where we see Hulk squeeze a cactus to fire its needles at Iron Man, and he's holding up a boulder to block the cactus needles that Hulk is squeezing at him. Well, Matt, I did want to make a few comparisons with the Kirby and Lee Fantastic Four. We've already made some of these in the course of the episode, but obviously the Hulk is handled here as what if Ben Grimm broke bad, and then it's also handled in a similar way to Submariner in the FF. Obviously, Hank and Jan are analogs to Reed and Sue in the FF, although Hank and Jan are so much worse. Then there's some really interesting similarities between Doctor Doom with a lot of the villains, whether it's Loki or Space Phantom or Zemo or Kang. But particularly with Loki and Space Phantom, it's interesting that they both rely on illusion in part to get the heroes to fight each other. Whereas with Doom, it's usually more wacky mad science things, which is more comparable to Kang.
Correct. There's definitely some comparisons between them, but the thing that throws away a lot of the comparisons is that these characters show up in these comics so often and frequently that it's hard not to compare them.
It is funny reading these all together as an adult. You notice the similarities a lot more than you do when you read them as a kid, or if you do like me and you tend to read Fantastic Four obsessively for 2 years, but then you switch over and you read X-Men obsessively for 2 years. If you're reading them in concentrated bursts like that, you don't see the similarities across the titles, right?
Right. And unfortunately, when it comes to plotting too, I feel like they go back to the well a lot with, okay, we're just going to make the Avengers fight each other, and we're going to find some way for the villain to make that happen, as opposed to having an actual physical villain.
The FF issues are much better plotted of, okay, there's a problem and the issue will deal with it, where many of these Avengers issues change course 3 or 4 times over the course of like 22 pages.
Correct. Especially with that Captain America issue we loved, but at the same time, I had trouble remembering exactly what the reasoning was for why they were hunting down some guy.
In a certain sense, we are saying it ceases to be a team book at all and becomes a Captain America solo adventure. Matt, in terms of ranking, where do you want to put this?
Well, Bob, we had talked about where we have Infinity Gauntlet located. Okay. And
Yeah.
that we said was a historical piece, and we understand its significance there, but as far as where our ranking goes, we had put it lower. What are your thoughts on Infinity Gauntlet compared to these Avengers issues?
I think that's the right comparison to make. And in both cases, I think Kirby's Avengers and Infinity Gauntlet are more historically important than they are good. But we're in a little bit of a crossroads because this is way more historically important than Infinity Gauntlet. But Infinity Gauntlet is way better than this. On balance, I would give it to Infinity Gauntlet. And so I guess I would say I would lean putting Kirby's Avengers in at our new number 23, which would be between Infinity Gauntlet and the Black Knight miniseries we just looked at. Although, obviously, the Black Knight miniseries is in a lot of respects better than this, but obviously it's not going to have any effect at all as compared to the massive historical effects of Kirby Avengers. So I don't know. Where do you come down on that?
I'm in agreement with that. I think that's a really good place to put it because you're absolutely right about the Black Knight not really having any historical significance at all. I hate to say this, I love the comic, but it's more of a throwaway unless you're interested in that hero. That also puts it above the Superman versus Fantastic Four, which once again I feel was more of a throwaway type thing of, oh, let's see how we can get them together and let's do it in the most obvious way. Which I didn't think the Superman versus Fantastic Four was that originally done. I'm good with putting it there.
Yeah, it's interesting that we have this here. I thought our first Kirby comic was going to be the Kirby Fantastic Four, and we can maybe have this argument once we're done with it, but it's going to be really hard for me to not put that number 1 when we rank it, although I can be convinced otherwise. But it's interesting, though, that instead of starting with the Kirby FF, we're starting with Kirby Avengers, which, yeah, obviously, these are really interesting, wacky, fun comics. You should look at them, but yeah, this is far from the best thing that Kirby would have his name on, and far from the best thing that Stan Lee would have his name on.
And you got to look at it this way, too. When you look at the big picture, especially with the MCU, when they decided they drew from the source material for those films, but they had to make sure they introduced all those characters individually beforehand because there's so much history there. So when you're looking at this Avengers book, I just don't see that same level of character development that you would see, especially with the Fantastic Four. There's so much more character development there with those 4 characters than there is here. So I think when we do get to the Fantastic Four Kirby stuff, and we're looking at ranking it, it's like, yeah, it needs to be up top.
People sometimes complain about how like combative the early Kirby Lee Fantastic Four is, especially with like the Thing. Seems like he could go villainous at every moment.
Right.
And you're not wrong to make this observation, right, about how cruel Johnny often is to Ben Grimm, right?
Right.
But it really does put it in perspective looking at these comics, which are so much worse in terms of the constant infighting. And also, I think a little bit hobbled by the fact that all of these characters have or shortly will have solo books.
Correct.
And so there's a lack of development of them in the Avengers books that comes along with that.
Right. And honestly, when you think of famous covers, you think of Fantastic Four over this in the grand scheme of things, like when you think of Kirby's art. So I feel like that's another big piece of that.
For sure. Well, Matt, so I don't know if you want to keep going with Avengers, like with Silver Age Avengers. And definitely, I think our priority is finishing the Kirby Fantastic Four. Originally, I just envisioned this as a lark because you like the Avengers showing up in Fantastic Four so much. I guess if we were to keep going, we have the Don Heck and Stan Lee run from issues 9 to 34. And so I guess I would say we would finish out this epic the next episode we do, which would get us from issues 9 through 20. And then we might, if we wanted to do another episode after that, we would do Epic Volume 2, which would be issues 21 through 40. And that would cover out the Don Heck Stan Lee. And then Roy Thomas came on at 35 as the writer, and he was the writer from 35 to 104. I don't necessarily think we would need or want to do the whole Roy Thomas run either, but we could then try, if we wanted, the first Roy Thomas epic, which would go 41 to 56, which is volume 3.
Yeah, so Bob, I did skim ahead a little bit, and I knew the next issue, I did read the full issue, number 9, and it's the introduction of Wonder Man. And with that being that recent series that came out, I was just fascinated by that and thought it was interesting. But as far as plotting and everything goes, it's okay. I mean, nothing amazing. I would prefer maybe if we just finished out this epic first, see what we think, and then go from there.
Makes sense to take it on a case by case
Right.
basis.
So let's just shoot for going on ahead and doing 9 through 20. And after issue 20, if we're good, we're good. If not, we'll continue.
Yeah, and I would definitely say let's finish Kirby Fantastic Four before 9 through 20, I would say. At least.
Oh, for sure, yes. And we'll be recording that next week. So looking forward to that with the coming of Galactus and everything that happens in those couple of issues.
Sounds great. Well, listeners, join us next week as we continue our march through the Kirby and Lee Fantastic Four. We also might have a special announcement episode next week. I am Bob in Cascadia. That's Matt in the Southland. And this has been our coverage of the Jack Kirby Stan Lee Avengers run.
Thanks for listening.